Wild Bill Hickok was known for carrying some of the most dangerous weapons in the Old West. Those guns played a huge role in turning him into a legend and helped him survive gunfights, knife fights, and all kinds of trouble in rough frontier towns. Let's talk about what he actually carried and why it worked so well for him. He was born as James Butler Hickok on May 27, 1837, in Troy Grove, Illinois. His father, William, was a Baptist deacon and also helped run a stop on the Underground Railroad. Growing up on a farm, Hickok learned how to shoot at a young age, and by the time he was a teenager, people around him already knew he was an excellent pistol shooter. His family history went way back to 1635 when his ancestors came from England, and his great-grandfather even fought in the Revolutionary War. That kind of background shaped how he looked at life. In 1855, when he was 18, Hickok left Illinois after getting into a fight. He went west to Kansas Territory, right in the middle of the violent conflicts over slavery known as Bleeding Kansas. There, he joined the anti-slavery Free State Army and worked as a bodyguard for General James H. Lane. During this time, he met a young boy named William Cody, who was only 11 years old. That boy later became famous as Buffalo Bill, and the two stayed friends their entire lives. At first, Hickok used simple weapons like flintlock shotguns and percussion guns for hunting, but since Kansas was dangerous, he quickly switched to revolvers for protection. By 1858, he had been elected constable in Monticello, Kansas, officially starting his law career. Later, he worked as a teamster for Russell, Majors, and Waddell, the company that ran the Pony Express. There's a well-known story from this time about Hickok fighting a bear. The story says the bear grabbed him, and he managed to kill it by cutting its throat with a knife while it crushed him. Some historians aren't sure if it really happened, but it shows that he depended on knives when guns couldn't help him. Now, the weapons that made him famous were his pair of Colt 1851 Navy revolvers with ivory handles in .36 caliber. These were cap-and-ball six-shooters, and he carried them everywhere. He wore them in a sash or in open holsters, with the handles facing forward so he could draw them quickly using a cavalry-style motion. These guns were well-balanced and accurate, and each one weighed about 2.6 pounds, making them lighter than larger .444 caliber revolvers. That lighter weight made a big difference when riding a horse or moving around in tight spaces like saloons. Samuel Colt designed the 1851 Navy between 1847 and 1850. At first, it was called the Ranger size or revolving belt pistol. It had a 7.5-inch octagonal barrel and fired .36 caliber rounds using black powder. The bullets traveled at about 840 feet per second, and in skilled hands, the gun could hit targets up to 100 yards away. The cylinder had an engraving showing a naval battle from 1843, which is where the name Navy came from. By 1873, more than 250,000 of these revolvers had been made, making them the most popular percussion revolver Colt ever produced. Hickok had his own pair customized with nickel plating and engravings that said J.B. Hickok 1869. He took extremely good care of them. Every day he reloaded them with fresh powder and practiced shooting. People who saw him said he could shoot corks out of bottlenecks from 90 feet away and keep cans rolling on the ground by hitting them again and again. These weren't just stories. Witnesses actually saw him do it. After the Civil War, newer guns using metallic cartridges became available. Even though he could have switched, Hickok stuck with his old Navy revolvers. He knew them perfectly and trusted how they worked. He did own some converted versions, including one in .38 caliber, but he always preferred his original ivory-handled Navies. Years of practice made those guns feel like part of his body. These revolvers saved his life more than once. In 1861, during the Rock Creek Station incident in Nebraska, Hickok used one of his Navies to kill David McCanley's and two other men during a dispute. Newspapers later exaggerated the story and claimed he killed a dozen outlaws, but the real number was 3, and it was most likely self-defense. Even though cap-and-ball guns sometimes had problems with misfires, Hickok knew how to maintain his weapons so they would work when needed. He didn't rely on just one weapon, though. He also carried backup guns, including .41 caliber Williamson Derringers. These were small, single-shot pistols with tip-up barrels, easy to hide in a vest pocket. They weighed less than a pound and used rimfire cartridges. The downside was obvious, you only got 1 or 2 shots, but for someone who spent time gambling in dangerous places, having a hidden weapon was very useful. Toward the end of his life, in Deadwood, Hickok carried a .32 rimfire Smith Wesson Model No. 2 revolver. This small 5-shot gun had a 6-inch barrel, a blued finish, and rosewood grips. Its serial number was 29,963, and it was found on him after he was killed on August 2, 1876. The gun could hit targets up to 50 yards away. A historian named Ed McGivern later confirmed it belonged to Hickok during a visit in 1932. Hickok also owned other firearms. He had a converted .44 caliber Colt Army Model 1860 that used metallic cartridges. In 1874, Buffalo Bill Cody and Texas Jack gave him .44 Smith Wesson American revolvers, which were more powerful. However, these guns don't appear in his photos, showing that he still preferred his familiar navies. For longer distances, Hickok used rifles. During his time as a Civil War scout and later in conflicts, he needed weapons that could reach farther. He owned a Winchester Model 1866 lever-action rifle chambered in .44 rimfire. People call it the Yellow Boy because of its shiny brass receiver. It could hold up to 15 rounds, and the lever-action system allowed fast shooting. A skilled person could fire all rounds in under 30 seconds. He used this rifle in 1869 during a fight alongside the 7th Cavalry against Cheyenne warriors. His favorite rifle, though, was a sporting version of the .50 caliber Springfield Model 1870 trapdoor. This powerful single-shot rifle used large cartridges and could take down big animals or enemies at long range. It weighed around 9 pounds, had a 36-inch barrel, and fired bullets at over 1,300 feet per second. That kind of power made it effective far beyond pistol range. This rifle was so important to him that it was buried with him in Deadwood. Earlier in his life, he may have used rifles like the Sharps or the Hawk and Plains rifle for buffalo hunting, though exact records don't confirm this. Hickok also carried knives because guns weren't always reliable. Sometimes they misfired or ran out of ammo. His famous bear story involved a large Bowie knife, which usually had blades between 8 and 12 inches long and were deadly in close combat. Photos show him carrying a butcher knife in his belt as well. These knives were used for fighting, skinning animals, and everyday work. He always had multiple ways to defend himself. His weapons proved their worth in real fights. The Rock Creek incident in 1861 helped build his reputation. Then in 1865, he fought Davis Tutt in Springfield, Missouri. This duel is considered the first quick-draw gunfight in American history. The two men stood about 75 yards apart in the town square. Tutt drew first, but Hickok calmly aimed his Navy revolver using his opposite forearm for support and fired a single shot. The bullet went straight through Tutt's heart. After Harper's Magazine published the story, Hickok became famous across the country. He worked as marshal in Hays City in 1869 and in Abilene in 1871. These towns were full of cowboys, gamblers, and troublemakers. Cattle drives brought in thousands of men with money and quick tempers. Hickok used his revolvers to keep order, enforcing rules that required people to give up their guns in town. His reputation alone was often enough to stop trouble before it started. But things didn't always go perfectly. In Abilene, during a confusing shootout, he killed a gambler named Phil Coe, but accidentally shot his own deputy, Mike Williams. Moments like this showed how messy and dangerous law enforcement was back then. Hickok could shoot with both hands, which was rare. If needed, he could draw and fire both revolvers at the same time. By 1876, his health was getting worse. He had glaucoma, which was slowly taking his eyesight. The man who could once hit tiny targets from a distance was starting to go blind. He went to Deadwood in Dakota Territory, hoping to find gold and start over. Even then, he still carried his navies, his Smith Wesson revolver, and his Springfield rifle. On August 2, 1876, Hickok was playing poker at Nuttall Man's saloon. He asked to sit with his back to the wall, but no one gave up their seat. A man named Jack McCall walked up behind him and shot him in the back of the head. At the time, Hickok was holding two pairs, aces and eights, which later became known as the dead man's hand. After his death, his legend only grew. Harper's Magazine had already written about him in 1867, describing him as almost superhuman. In 1873, he even joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, though he didn't enjoy performing and left after one season. Over the years, movies and TV shows kept his story alive. Gary Cooper played him in The Plainsman in 1936, and Keith Carradine portrayed him in the HBO series Deadwood. Today, some of his real weapons are still preserved. One of his Navy revolvers is kept at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West, while his Smith & Wesson revolver ended up in private collections. Modern companies like Uberti and Pietta even MA key replicas of his guns, often in .38 Special, so people today can experience something similar. His set of weapons was practical and built for survival. Stories later exaggerated his speed and the number of people he killed, sometimes claiming hundreds, but the real number was closer to 10. In reality, Hickok was a skilled shooter who chose reliable weapons and took great care of them. His .36 caliber Navy revolvers, backup derringers, rifles, and knives gave him everything he needed to survive in a violent time. For over 20 years, he lived through shootouts, battles, and dangerous towns. In the end, his weapons kept him alive until someone shot him from behind,